Tonight at 10, an official investigation has now been launched into the funding of renovation work on Boris Johnson's flat. There are grounds to suspect an offence may have happened, according to the Electoral Commission, and Labour stepped up its attack.
What do we get from this Prime Minister and this Conservative government? Dodgy contracts, jobs for their mates and cash for access. And who's at the heart of it? The Prime Minister, Major Sleaze, sitting there.
Week after week, the people of this country can see the difference between a Labour Party that twists and turns with the wind, that thinks of nothing except playing political games, whereas this party gets on with delivering on the people's priorities.
Well, we'll be asking what the involvement of the Electoral Commission could mean for the Prime Minister. Also tonight, Arlene Foster is to step down as leader of the Democratic Unionists and as Northern Ireland's First Minister after dozens of colleagues said that they'd lost confidence in her leadership. Pandemic in India, hospitals overwhelmed, record infections and soaring death rates. We report on the fight against the new surge. A new study finds that just one dose of a COVID vaccine cuts the risk of transmission by up to 50%.
In the sport on the BBC News Channel, Lions coach Warren Gatland admits it's a big blow losing George North to a knee injury ahead of their upcoming tour to South Africa.
Good evening. There's to be an official investigation into the funding of renovation work on Boris Johnson's flat above number 10 Downing Street. A formal inquiry will be carried out by the Electoral Commission, which says there's reason to believe the rules may not have been followed. Mr Johnson has again insisted that he paid for the work himself and has complied with the codes of conduct. Labour's leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the inquiry showed how serious this matter had now become, and he accused Mr Johnson of leading a government mired in sleaze. Our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, has more details.
There's no place like home.
Are you worried about the investigation, Prime Minister?
And there's been no fix quite like this for Boris Johnson before.
Who coughed up for the flat, sir?
His flat's had an expensive makeover. He won't say who first paid. A mystery that's now subject to a serious investigation. But the Electoral Commission today said, we are now satisfied there are reasonable grounds to suspect that an offence or offences may have occurred. With claims that Tory donors might have picked up the tab, the suspicion the rules were broken.
Initially is the key word here. Who initially paid for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat?
He should know that I paid for Downing Street refurbishment personally, Mr Speaker. Any further declaration that I have to make, I will, if any, I will be advised upon by Lord Geit.
Lord Geit used to work for the Queen, and he'll now watch over ministers' behaviour. But remember, the question isn't who stumped up in the end. It's who paid Boris Johnson's bills at the start.
What do we get from this Prime Minister and this Conservative government? Dodgy contracts, jobs for their mates and cash for access. And who's at the heart of it? The Prime Minister, Major Sleaze, sitting there. Don't the British people deserve a Prime Minister they can trust and a government that isn't mired in sleaze, cronyism and scandal?
Week after week, the people of this country can see the difference between a Labour Party that twists and turns with the wind, that thinks of nothing except playing political games, whereas this party gets on with delivering on the people's priorities.
This isn't about spending cash on cushions or curtains. It's about where the money came from to do so at the start. All politicians have to declare any money or loans they receive so that we can all be absolutely sure precisely what's going on. But the Prime Minister appears to be feeling the heat now on several fronts. Angry denials down there were the order of the day.
Did the Prime Minister rage he'd rather see bodies pile up than lock down again? As several sources familiar with the exchanges have told the BBC and other news organisations.
Can the Prime Minister tell the House categorically, yes or no, did he make those remarks or remarks to that effect?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr Speaker, and I think that if he's going to repeat allegations like that, he should come to this House and substantiate those allegations.
Parliamentary rules stop me from saying that the Prime Minister has repeatedly lied to the public over the last week. But can I ask the question, are you a liar, Prime Minister?
I didn't say those words. What I do believe is that a lockdown is a miserable, miserable thing. And I did everything I could to try to protect the British public throughout the pandemic, to protect them from lockdowns, but also to protect them from disease.
Yet the Prime Minister's opponents are trying to peck away at Boris Johnson's integrity. And at the very least, unanswered questions are a big distraction.
If a serving government minister is found to have broken the rules on party funding or even law, should they resign?
Given that this is a coronavirus press conference, you won't be surprised that I'm not going to add to the answers the Prime Minister's already given to very extensive questioning. Thanks.
But avoiding questions doesn't make them disappear. There are multiple inquiries now into exactly what happened. Political reputations must be tended to with care.
Well, let's go live to Westminster and join Laura, who's there for us. Laura, in your view, what is the potential danger to the Prime Minister from this latest inquiry?
Well, I think today's announcement certainly puts this saga into a different league. And, you know, whether or not you're watching tonight and you're interested in expensive furniture in Downing Street, whether or not you're watching tonight and thinking that you have no interest in the interior design and travails of everything that's happened in the Downing Street flat, the fact is that an independent organisation, the Electoral Commission, which has legal powers, has taken a first look and has concluded that there are enough doubts and enough unanswered questions that what has been going on here does merit a formal investigation. Now, the Prime Minister has been clear in his view, nothing has gone wrong, no rules have been broken, and there are several inquiries now looking into what's been a bit of a mystery in terms of who picked up the initial bill. But this matters because in this country there are strict rules about how politicians are meant to approach any money, loans or financial donations they're given. And there are very strict guidelines and there can be consequences when ministers don't follow them. But for those ministers and Conservatives who in the last few days have tried to shrug this off as just being tittle-tattle or tried to suggest that the public somehow isn't interested in this at all, the fact that there is now a formal investigation like this does change that. And for as long as there are questions that haven't been answered by the Prime Minister, questions will still hang over him about exactly what went on.
Laura, many thanks. Laura Kuensberg there with the latest analysis at Westminster. Now, in Northern Ireland, Arlene Foster has resigned as the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party and as First Minister. More than 20 DUP Assembly members at Stormont and 4 MPs at Westminster signed a letter saying they have no confidence in her leadership. She became leader of the party in December of 2015 and was the first woman and the youngest person to hold both of those posts. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy reports, and there's some flash photography coming up.
In its 50-year history, Arlene Foster is only the 3rd leader of the DUP, a party known for its hardline brand of unionism and staunch British identity, now at a rare crossroads.
A short time ago, I called my party chairman to inform him that I intend to step down as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. It has been the privilege of my life to serve the people of Northern Ireland as their First Minister.
Mrs Foster formed her political ideals growing up during the years of violence in Northern Ireland. The IRA tried to kill her father when she was a child, and a bomb exploded under her school bus in Fermanagh in 1988.
And I closed my eyes because I just didn't know what was going on, and Gillian fell on top of me sideways.
As a law student, Arlene Foster joined the youth wing of the more moderate Ulster Unionists before defecting to the DUP.
I believe that the Democratic Unionist Party is now the mainstream Unionist Party in Northern Ireland.
She rose quickly through its ranks, becoming one of the party's most popular and unwavering politicians.
When you think about bullying me, think again.
Before replacing Peter Robinson to become First Minister in 2016. It meant working alongside Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness, the former IRA commander who became Northern Ireland's Deputy First Minister, until he resigned causing a 3-year collapse in power sharing over the DUP's handling of a green energy scheme, which wasted hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money.
Like that, darling?
Tonight, Arlene Foster's current partner in the coalition at Stormont had a message for her successor.
They have to be committed to power sharing. That's working together. That's about politics delivering for everybody. That's about progression. It's about, delivering for all citizens who live here.
It was Brexit which became Arlene Foster's biggest nemesis. Her profile rose as the DUP propped up Theresa May's government through the Confidence and Supply Agreement. When Boris Johnson promised to protect the union, she championed him.
He is a fabulous friend to the union and a promoter of the...
But when he agreed a Brexit deal which separated Northern Ireland in trading terms from the rest of the UK, it was damaging to the party and Arlene Foster's leadership. Now, the anger among loyalist communities over Brexit has raised the stakes. There is a sense that unionism in Northern Ireland is weakened and losing ground to nationalists. And now Arlene Foster is paying the price.
Let's go live to Stormont, and Emma's there for us. Emma, as you were saying, it's an immensely fragile political situation there. So what for you are the potential implications of Arlene Foster's resignation?
Well, look, any change in leadership can have a significant effect on the dynamic of the power sharing relationships here at Stormont and for the whole mood towards Brexit on the streets. And because not being strong enough in opposing the Northern Ireland Protocol, those Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland is being seen as one of the reasons for Arlene Foster's downfall, the new party leader could decide to take the party further to the right and dig in even harder against those Brexit arrangements, especially in the run-up to the Assembly elections next year, when they'll have to answer to DUP voters on the doorsteps as to why they ended up with the thing they least wanted, a border down the Irish Sea. But taking that approach, campaigning against the Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland, also risks very much angering nationalist parties here who do want to make the Irish Sea border arrangements work. And recent history shows us that any increase in divisions in the power-sharing partners here at Stormont can eventually potentially affect the overall running of Northern Ireland altogether. Huw.
Emma, many thanks again. Emma Vardy with the latest thoughts there at Stormont. Now, in India, the pandemic continues to worsen, with more than 200,000 deaths officially confirmed. On average in the past week, more than 340,000 cases of coronavirus have been reported each day. That's an infection rate which is more than 20 times higher than 2 months ago. As for deaths, the official count is an average of more than 2,600 people a day over the past week. But for both infections and deaths, the numbers are thought to be significantly underestimated. Across the country, hospitals are continuing to struggle with a shortage of oxygen and beds. As our correspondent Yogita Limai reports from Delhi, there are some upsetting images in Yogita's report.
Years of training, but nothing could have prepared them for this. Manjusha Matthew, a nurse and the mother of 3 young children. Every few minutes, there's a new patient. She's constantly scanning how others are holding up. Treating as many as they can. People say, "Sister, please save our loved one." They call us God. That makes us so emotional because we can only do so much.
Even हम भी emotional हो जाते हैं.
We've been following her all week. It's been relentless. I tried so hard to revive this man, she told us, but I couldn't. With resources so short, they're having to choose who they might save. Decisions they should never have had to make.
बीच-बीच में हमको रोना भी होते, वो feelings हमको
At times we break down. Some nights I wake up crying, but I also feel a sense of satisfaction that I'm doing something to help. This is a hospital in a big city, better off than most others. Weeks of toil lie ahead in a city that's overrun. Everything needed to fight COVID is in short supply.
Every morning in India, we're waking up to news that someone we know has died. Through the day, there are frantic pleas for oxygen, hospital beds, medicines, on the phone, online, even on the streets. And amidst all of that, we're also seeing people who wake up every morning, put on their protective gear, and get down to business, trying to help as many people as they can.
Sarabjit Singh Ghai is a volunteer trying to provide oxygen to critical patients. They should be in intensive care. Desperation has brought them here. Sarabjit offers a temporary reprieve, keeping people alive till they get hospital care. When people's lives hang in the balance, we thought this is one thing we could do to try to save someone, he says. Rati Gadgil has driven her mother here. We're getting nothing from the government, no support. They only come to us when they want a vote. Now, where are they, she says. This man collapsed on his way here. The need is just too great. With each cylinder, they're trying to help as many as they can. Once stabilized, the hunt begins again. Hundreds of people are coming here each day. If we had help from the government, we could do so much more, he says. 10 days since Delhi locked down, people wait by the side of a road for oxygen. This is India's capital city. Yogita Lamai, BBC News, Delhi.
Well, that was the report that Yogita filed just a short while ago, but we're now able to join her live in Delhi tonight. Yogita, let's talk about the concept of accountability here for all of the problems and all of the tragedies that we saw there in the report. What is the notion of political accountability?
Well, I think you've got to look at the circumstances that resulted in India finding itself in this position. In February, you had the ruling BJP party virtually declare victory over the pandemic under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In early March, when you had surges being reported from some districts in India, you had the Health Minister Harshvardhan say that that the coronavirus pandemic was in its endgame in India. The government allowed mass gatherings for religious festivals, for political rallies, till as recently as a week ago. And with that messaging coming from the top, you saw people on the ground becoming complacent as well, not following COVID protocols. Even though in India, we could see that there were the second wave of COVID-19 was more deadly in many parts of the world. Basic things like stocking up on oxygen supplies, stocking up on medicines, ramping up medical facilities was not done. In fact, during the first wave, there were some field hospitals that were built up. Those were actually dismantled. And so now India finds itself in this position where it is trying to rush in oxygen to places where there is a shortage. There is aid coming in from other parts of the world. But this crisis is unfolding on the ground at such a rapid speed that this help is not getting to people in time. There are people dying today who could have been saved if they had oxygen in time, if they had a hospital bed in time.
Yogita, many thanks once again. Yogita Limai there, our correspondent in Delhi. Let's stay with India because COVID cases there have been rising steeply, as we know, over the past few weeks. And with that increase has come the inevitable increase in deaths. And our science correspondent, Rebecca Morel, has been looking at what's behind this surge and what it could mean, indeed, for the rest of the world.
The death toll keeps on rising as India struggles to cope with its COVID crisis. But how did they get to this point? And are variants behind the surge in cases? Since April, India has reported 5 million COVID infections. Each day is bringing record numbers. But are changes to the virus causing this explosive growth, or people's behaviour?
It's always a combination of things. The increase in social mixing that's happened over the last several months, the sort of dropping of the guard of people thinking that they can go back to being normal, as well as the potentially the variants that have emerged.
So how is the virus mutating? And what do we know about the variants?
The picture is different in different parts of the country. In Delhi and Punjab, the UK variant is dominant. It has a mutation to the spike of the virus that allows it to enter cells more easily, so it can infect more people. But in Maharashtra and West Bengal, a new Indian variant has emerged. It has 2 key mutations. Lab studies suggest it's slightly more infectious, but less so than the UK variant. But the changes may mean that antibodies find it harder to block the virus. But scientists need to assess how much immunity is lost.
It probably means the virus is a bit less well able to be neutralized by vaccines, but certainly I don't think there's any evidence that it's an escape mutation or that it fundamentally can't be stopped by the vaccines. And I think we have to obviously watch carefully, but there's at present no reason to panic about it.
So is this only affecting India? What does it mean for the rest of the world? The priority now is to get medical care to the sickest, but there's also an urgent need to reduce transmission, because if the virus is out of control in one country, it's likely to spread to others. And these are ideal conditions for the virus to evolve.
The way to limit viral variants emerging in the first place is to prevent the virus replicating in us. That's when they get the chance to have for the mutation to arise. So the best way to control variants is actually to control the global amount of disease that we have at the moment.
Globally, the pandemic shows no sign of easing. The World Health Organization says vaccines are vital, but until they're available everywhere, this is a bleak reminder that no one is safe until we're all safe. Rebecca Morell, BBC News.
Well, after that, let's have a look then at the latest official figures here in the UK. 2,166 new infections in the latest 24-hour period, which means an average of 2,299 new cases per day in the past week. And there are 1,634 people in hospital with coronavirus. The number continues to fall. 29 deaths were recorded in the past 24 hours of people who've had a positive COVID test within the previous 28 days. The average number of deaths per day in the past week is 22, and the total number of UK deaths so far is 127,480. Let's take a look at the vaccination programme. A total of nearly 34 million people in the UK have now had their first jab, and the overall number who've had their second jab is now over 13.5 million. Well, the United Kingdom has purchased another 60 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine to support a booster vaccination programme, which will begin in the autumn. Ministers will prioritise the most vulnerable people for the extra jabs to try to ensure that they're protected throughout the months of the winter. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh has the story.
Every day, with every vaccine, our defences against coronavirus get stronger. Just one dose of either Pfizer-BioNTech or Oxford-AstraZeneca not only gives substantial protection against severe COVID, but for those who do still get infected, it cuts their chances of passing on the virus by up to half.
What this means is the evidence is stacking up that the vaccine protects you, it protects your loved ones, and it is the way out of this pandemic.
The route out of lockdown looks increasingly clear as cases, hospitalisations and deaths all remain low.
The number of COVID patients in hospital in the UK has fallen by 96% since the peak in January and is continuing to decline. At the same time, nearly 7 in 10 adults in England, slightly lower elsewhere in the UK, now have antibodies and therefore some immunity to coronavirus, either from past infection or vaccination. It's highest among those aged 70 to 74, where 87% have antibodies, Most of them are fully immunised. But nearly 20 million adults still haven't had a dose of COVID vaccine. Ministers and leading scientists are still urging a cautious approach to lifting restrictions.
If we all go completely wild and just ignore everything then that we've learned over this last year in terms of social restrictions, there will be another wave, and that wave will be much larger.
The government is buying a further 60 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, which should be available from this autumn as third booster shots. As for this summer, the NHS app might be used to show evidence of vaccination or a recent negative virus test for those wanting a foreign holiday. Spain will shortly begin testing digital vaccine certificates. But the rules here banning foreign travel will remain in place until at least the 17th of May. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
The US President Joe Biden is preparing to mark 100 days in office with his first speech to a joint session of Congress in the next few hours. He's expected to call for major changes to the benefit system, paid for partly by reversing Donald Trump's tax cuts on the wealthiest Americans. Our North America editor, John Sopel, is at the White House. So as we talk about this 100-day milestone, John, is this presidency the kind of presidency that you'd expected?
Well, Huw, I think we expected it to be calmer. We expected not to get the daily fireworks soleil lumiere that we had under the Trump era. This is a pyrotechnic-free zone. But just because it's unexciting doesn't mean it's uninteresting. Arguably, what Joe Biden is doing is not just being this transitional president, he wants to be transformational. And he is adopting European-style social welfare policies that have not been seen in America for many decades. The sums of money that he's talking about spending are eye-watering. I mean, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, $1 trillion somewhere else. It starts to add up as serious money. And all of this against the backdrop of the coronavirus outbreak, which he is using as his pretext to essentially rewrite the economic rules that have guided Britain and America for the past 40 years. Now, if you're a Republican, you are saying this is going way too far. It's expensive, it's controversial. Joe Biden seems to be an old man in a hurry.
John, many thanks again. John Sopel with the latest thoughts there at the White House. Let's stay in the US because Rudy Giuliani, the personal lawyer to former President Trump, has had his Manhattan home searched by federal investigators. The raid was ordered as part of a probe into Mr. Giuliani's dealings with Ukraine, according to officials. And federal prosecutors have been investigating Mr. Giuliani's role in attempting to persuade Ukrainian officials to dig up some political dirt on Joe Biden. 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been charged over photographs allegedly taken at a crime scene where 2 sisters were stabbed to death. The photographs relate to the deaths of Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman, who were found in Wembley last June. PC Denise Jaffa and PC Jamie Lewis have each been charged with misconduct in a public office, and they will appear in court on the 27th of May. Nestlé has announced plans to close its factory in Newcastle upon Tyne, with a loss of 475 jobs. The plant in Fordon, which makes more than a dozen products, including fruit pastels and Rolos, is expected to shut by the end of 2023. And almost 100 other jobs will be cut at a second factory in York. A murder investigation has been launched into the death of a police community support officer in Kent. The body of Julia James, who was 53, was found in woodland near Dover yesterday. Detectives say that her death is being treated as suspicious, but no arrests have been made. Now, new details have emerged of the impact of the government's decision to cut the UK's overseas aid budget. A leaked ministerial briefing paper shows that most of the funding set aside for water and sanitation projects is being withdrawn. Now, our diplomatic correspondent James Landale is here with me with more details. James?
Huw, the government announced last November it was going to cut about £4 billion from the foreign aid budget. But it refused to say where the axe would fall. Details, though, are now beginning to emerge. A leaked Foreign Office memo says there'll be an 80% cut to Britain's direct funding for water, sanitation and hygiene projects, right in the middle of a global pandemic. According to the DevEx development website, there's going to be an even greater cut, 95% to Britain's funding for polio eradication. And at a recent United Nations conference, the UK said it would reduce aid for the humanitarian crisis in Yemen for more than 50%. Now, the Foreign Office says these cuts are tough but necessary decisions because of the impact of the pandemic on the economy. And ministers think many voters will agree with that. They also emphasise that despite the cuts, Britain's still one of the biggest aid donors, with £10 billion remaining in the budget to spend on things like girls' education and climate change. But charities, MPs and peers lined up today to criticise those cuts, accusing ministers of balancing the books on the backs of the world's poorest, while also damaging Britain's reputation, prompting fresh talk of a possible legal challenge. So the political battle continues, while the impact of the cuts begins to be felt on the ground. Huw.
James, many thanks. James Landale there, our diplomatic correspondent. Now, the Wales football manager, Ryan Giggs, has pleaded not guilty to assaulting 2 women in Salford last November. Former Manchester United player also denied accusations of coercive or controlling behaviour towards his former girlfriend. He was released on bail ahead of a trial at Manchester Crown Court next month. Well, it's been an excellent night for Manchester City in the Champions League. They won their semi-final first leg against Paris Saint-Germain 2-1. It leaves them strong favourites to progress to next month's final in Istanbul. Our sports correspondent Natalie Perks has more details.
To join Europe's elite, City would need to stop these two, the unplayable pair. And Neymar's first warning came early.
Here's Neymar with the chance.
But frustrated much? Time for a change. And in the second half, City dug deep and put their trust in De Bruyne. City had their Premier League swagger back, now outfoxing Paris at every turn.
It is Mahrez. Oh, it's another one.
Mind the gap at the back. With 2 away goals, City are in the driving seat. The match, dubbed El Gassico, lived up to its billing. Natalie Perks, BBC News.
That's it. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.